Hello, hello, hello. Happy weekend. Happy Saturday, everybody. Um, I have not used the mic in so long. This is me. This is me doing a live after like, I don't know how many months. I wanted to do this live because I just saw Maggie Gyllenhaal's amazing film, The Bride. And so I want to share a little bit about my feelings when it comes to what I saw. There might be spoilers, so I would definitely say watch that first and then come back to this. But I want to talk about it specifically as how it relates to the Epstein Files, because there was a line that she said, the actress said, and it was actually, it was just, like, so funny. I was sitting there in the theater aquí in Puerto Rico, and I was thinking to myself, that it just is so perfect because it really captures a lot of what I've been feeling as well when it comes to these files. She said, "The dead have something to say." And my thought was immediately like, down with empire, down with child killers, down with pedophiles, and so there was a very visceral way that she represented, especially female rage and the ways that society has treated not just women but children, just in general, how a woman's body is treated. And so I think she just did an exceptional job. So I just want to say thank you, Maggie. You'll never see this video, but thank you. I would interview you in a heartbeat because I would love to. I'd love to hear how she, and I'm sure there will be interviews if there aren't already, just around how she thought up, how she wrote it, and everything. But one thing I really liked, besides the cinematography, the acting was amazing, the direction was amazing, but was just this sense of how, like, the arc of this protagonist, and how I feel like it also captures how a lot of women feel in society. I think a lot about like my childhood, my early teens, and how I was indoctrinated into this system. Right? I didn't know what colonialism was. I didn't know what the patriarchy was growing up. Now I'm grateful because more young women are being exposed to that and understand. Right? They're able to give a little bit more of it's tough because it's like just being able to name this anger that you feel, that even from a young age you're being treated a certain way and you don't even have the words to describe the exploitation around it, the vulnerability that you feel, the ways that we're so often treated like property. And so as someone who is living in a colony and is a descendant of a colonized people, right? When we think about Puerto Rico and its relationship to the United States, it's just like that was really meaningful to me. I think, like, being able to see this. It's also a perspective of a white woman, of course, but I think in light of the Epstein files and how this film was able to capture just women and how society treats women, I think was incredible. And just this sense of ownership. As I was also thinking of Julia de Burgos and how she made her name de Burgos, meaning of herself. And I think that was also really beautiful in the arc of this film. You see the protagonist not know who she was. Like, she didn't even know her own name. And I really like that she juxtaposed it also with the author of Frankenstein, also a woman, and just like the prominent, I guess, like the characters in this film. Yes, there were men, but it was mostly women, and just the way you have like the author describing how Frankenstein, by the way, was done as a dare. This is, how the film starts, talking about how, like, Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, was, I guess, she was almost challenged to write this. And in a lot of ways, a lot of women are also challenged often, to say like, oh, you're not going to be able to do that, and prove ourselves multiple times, even to other women who just, that's another story. But it's just the way that she captured that sense of like having to prove yourself. And even within the film, there were moments between actresses that sense of like competition, or that sense of having to prove yourself and who you are. And so I loved it. And it said so much too about how it felt very, very much like, as we were watching this protagonist, and how, her, from the very beginning, again, spoilers, so stop here if you haven't seen it, the fact that she dies at the beginning and is reborn, also a very beautiful poetic way of describing how women are sort of the death and the birth of realizing that this society uses us and exploits us, and doesn't care, right? It's like the harm that a lot of women are exposed to. And so she's killed in the beginning because she says and does things that are trying to expose the top guy, right? And that's, I think about that a lot when it comes to Epstein, because it wouldn't none of this would have come out if it wasn't for women continuing to advocate for the release of these files, right? And there's one particular woman, and I forget her name. I'm going to try to remember it. But I think about that a lot too. The fact that Epstein Files, you would think, with all the power that they had and have, that they would have stopped it somehow, and they did for many, many, many months. Many, at this point, I don't know if it was years, they were able to stop that from coming out. But throughout so much time, women have been coming forward and have been sharing their story, and now people are finally believing them. And not only that, the fact that in the files, whether it's the Democrats talking about it or the Republicans or whoever is reviewing these files, they say it's so much worse than what we've seen, and I can't even imagine anything worse. So to see this film really break down these dynamics and talk about how there is another underworld that is really controlling and causing a lot of this harm. I think when she said the dead have something to say, it really struck me about how we don't even know how many women have been killed, whether it's hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, because this spans such a long time, right? The Epstein Files, when we think about how long it spans, that's another thing that really got me thinking a lot about the dead, all of the women that have been killed and whose deaths have been, what's the word? Whose deaths have been covered up and hidden. And so I'm gonna just share my screen here because I wanted to. This is a film here, Soylent Green. I'm gonna cover this last, but I if you've already seen Soylent Green, you already know where I'm going with this. But let's start with The Bride, right? Because The Bride, like I said, based on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It was a beautiful film. Like what can I say? Like they had great actors. I really, it's funny. I didn't expect Penelope Cruz actually, but they had so many good actors. They had obviously Jake Gyllenhaal, Christian Bale, Jessie Buckley. Her performance was incredible. I loved the way that the the wardrobe, but also the makeup and how the aesthetic that they chose was just beautiful. So I hope you'll watch the film. I think when I was watching it, I was also thinking a lot about how like women will really deeply connect with this because there is just such a um a female rage, that we often are called crazy. We're often called all kinds of names, but this film really captures exactly why. It breaks it down. It made me feel, if anything, I was angry, but then I was calm because it's like, okay, we actually all do have a universal way of feeling about this that is shared across even across cultures, across races. Like, the one thing I will say is I don't think that we often see like the racial dynamic, especially when we think about these files, the Epstein files. Also, there is some mention there too, but just thinking about how historically a lot of what's in the Epstein files has happened to communities, indigenous communities and Black communities, and talking through, especially when there's conversations around eating people, and again, all alleged, right? But I still think that that's something valid to say, that the exploitation of indigenous and Black communities, it all intersects. And so anyway, I really, I loved it. I think it was like, I think it's something I'm going to watch again, but I think a lot of people really need to dive into this. I'll probably give it another 2 or 3 watches at the theater because it was beautiful to watch too. Like the cinematography was incredible. But yeah, I think there's so much to break down here. And so I look forward, if you guys enjoy this video, I look forward to maybe doing a second video where I break down certain scenes and I can kind of go a little bit deeper in. But she did an amazing job. Really, Maggie Gyllenhaal did just an incredible job. I don't know how long it took them to from writing to actual screen, but I really I can't say enough about this. But anyway, besides this film, I want to now dive into another film that the It films, right? The specifically Welcome to Derry. I think if you haven't seen it yet, the series kind of takes a dive into the past, into what sets up the creature called It. And so again, I have a lot of spoilers. So if you haven't seen this one either, you stop right here and watch it later. But I think knowing that it was again an alien that came to Earth, and that it has all this like connection to energy and to fear, and specifically, as we heard in the Epstein Files, that they specifically torture and psychologically harm children so that they could, again, all alleged, but this whole conversation around how the blood is taken, or about how this energy, and so I thought a lot about how this series, but also the films, right? And like when was, I don't know when it was actually, when we think about, I can look it up here, 1986. And so when I think about the time frame of Epstein, and when people have talked about the fact that Epstein was like one guy in a line of people who do this, I think about 1986. There's possibility that in 1986 there were already allegations, or there was already a trafficking ring, a child trafficking ring. So I think that while I've heard that Stephen King came up with It as a result of some kind of like psychedelic or whatever, I don't think that that's true. I think either he knew or he had heard of these things. There are a lot of people who are being tied to Epstein that you would never have expected. I would hope Stephen King is not one of them. But again, people keep saying it's wild how deep this runs. And so when I heard about the fact that it being about children being kidnapped, and this monster feeding on their fear, Epstein Files immediately. So I don't know. I think that people aren't willing to take that leap, and maybe people are. I haven't really seen anyone ever even talk about this, but I'm like, it's right there in front of us. Like I'm laughing because I'm like, this is terrifying, that we are talking about a very similar thing. And I think they do put a lot, and I think of Hollywood, they put a lot of what they really do into films, or what is really happening, right? Like when I think of there was another film by, oh my goodness, what's her name? This is so crazy. I just saw it. And it's the film of the women who are taken to an island. They're all wearing white. I know the film. It's on the tip of my tongue. But there's so many films that kind of like allude to this trafficking, and to the ways that children specifically are targeted. And so none of this, and that's the other thing, none of this sounds like a stretch. Like once you watch, especially, I'll go back to it, but once you watch this particular Welcome to Derry, I swear I thought that was one of the most spot on, the way that they also try to make, the children, I think like children dying on screen has also been it's been such an interesting evolution, because as a kid, I never saw these kinds of things. And I think I'd never seen it, that the fact that it was 1986, I'd never seen the old ones. I had always been like, no, that's not for me. I was not very into horror growing up, but like as I got older, I have definitely been a lot more into this genre. And so watching Welcome to Derry and seeing how they tie it to the indigenous too, and I thought that was brilliant in the series. But just seeing how, again, it's a whole community that is like being exposed to certain things, and not really wanting to face them, not believing that it could be true until they see this. And so I think a lot about how the Epstein Files is doing the same thing to us. It's like we're being exposed to this and we're barely able to believe it. But then by the time, we react, it feels too late, and that's another aspect of this that I found really interesting, that like no one's reacting. You know, that we can say the same thing about the film The Bride. I felt like there were certain scenes where horrible things were happening to women and no one's reacting. No one's putting a stop to it, except, you know, in this case, Christian Bale's character Frankenstein. But he's a monster. He's not. He's dead technically, and so it's almost like, how do we, how do we as a society, we're constantly seeing these really dark things happening, and why are we not reacting? You know, what is it about, you know, these these dynamics? And so, I think with this series, I was really struck with like how well, the pacing was really great, that monster was really great. But just there is a sense that, especially the monster is not, it's just focused on feeding on fear, right? And so I was really captured by the performances and the fact that, like, again, it's a very clear picture of how they feed on our fear, right? They feed on the fear of children, and it makes them feel powerful. It makes them feel like gods. And so, it's I think it's an important piece, right? As we're trying to understand what the Epstein files are. I was, again, really struck by this one. Truly think it's an important one, to watch. There's definitely something to it. So besides, the It movies, besides The Bride, I do want to talk about Soylent Green. Soylent Green, such an interesting film. These are just some of the visuals here. Uh, it's funny. As someone, I was like doing a road trip down to Cabo Rojo, and my friend Ali and I were talking about this film because I said to her, "Oh, have you ever heard of this one film about how?" Well, actually, let me go into it. Let's take a step back. So, Soylent Green is a film that I believe I watched in my high school sci-fi class. So, just off the bat, this is a sci-fi. It's a dystopian thriller set in 2022. It was released in 1973, and I think when I watched it, I thought it was very interesting. It was very psychological. Um, I haven't watched it recently. I think I'm gonna watch it again after this. But I just remember at the time thinking to myself, like, wow, 1973, they were really like coming up with some really wild, interesting ideas. I don't think I would have ever thought about a story like this. But here's where it gets interesting, right? Because in the past week, I would say a lot of people have been talking about McDonald's and have been making claims and allegations. Again, nothing proven, right? I think it's really important to say, like, those, there have been, I've been seeing a lot in my social media of people saying like, oh, don't eat the meat and at McDonald's or any fast food because, these cannibals, these elites, right, are putting things in our food. And then we think about Bill Gates and all those allegations made on Bill Gates in terms of how he's so intent on controlling the food we eat, on the things that, we're consuming, the vaccines, like, I think a lot of those allegations against Bill Gates and against the elites ties into this. And that's why I really wanted to talk about this film last, because Soylent Green, being a sci-fi thriller of 2022 that talks about how at the time there's a worldwide, here, I'm going to read from it. Effects of overpopulation, global warming, pollution have caused ecocide, leading to a severe shortage on food, water, and housing. And I remember at the time watching the film, and the people in this film are eating a bar called Soylent Green because there is very little food left. So everyone's designated this bar that's supposed to give you all the nutrients you need to get to the next day, right? So it's very like, this is all we have. New York City has a population of 40 million. Only the elite can afford the spacious apartments, right? Natural food in these walled off communities. And I think a lot about, taking a quick step back to Puerto Rico. I think a lot about these walled off communities like Project Esencia here, which is, foreign investors coming to Puerto Rico and trying to create their own little luxury city. Reminds me a lot about this, but I digress. Let's move on. So the homes are fortified with moats. Again, I keep thinking about the bunkers that the freaking billionaire class have created. They include concubines, who are referred to as furniture with no human rights and are passed from one apartment owner to the next. That part I don't remember. Again, very interesting tie to Epstein and everything going on, right? Meanwhile, majority live in squalor. They haul water from communal spigots, keep highly processed food wafers. This is what I was talking about, made by the Soylent Corporation. It's a corporation. Again, I'm telling you, I'm really excited to talk about this one because after I had the conversation with my friend, I said, like, more people need to know about this film and what a coincidence. I don't really believe in coincidences. What a coincidence that they're the only ones that provide people with food, right? A lot of people have been talking about the fact that we are no longer, I'm like, it's funny because I have my little light here. It's like, we no longer grow our own food. And the good thing is that a lot of Puerto Ricans and a lot of people across the world have been trying to build self-sustaining communities where you build, you make your own food. But this is why it's so important because, if we think about what happens in a world where you let one corporation handle all of our food, this is what this is what happens. So anyway, let's continue reading because I again, out of all of the sci-fi films I can remember, and I love sci-fi, so I've seen a few of them, this one was really compelling, really compelling. So anyway, as there's a detective, Robert Thorne, lives in a cramped apartment with his aging coworker uh, and friend Saul Roth, a brilliant former college professor and police researcher who helps him with his cases. And so Detective Thorne, is called to investigate the murder of a wealthy, influential member of the Soylent Corporation's board. So this person, William Simonson, is found murdered. He's killed, so he's sent to investigate. This leads him His investigation leads to a priest that Simonson had visited shortly before his death. That's an important point. Due to the sanctity of the confessional, the priest can only hint at the contents of the confession, but soon after, this priest is murdered. Obviously, a cover-up. Again, similar things have been going on, and we barely notice it. That's why I think it's so important to kind of look at Hollywood and to see how they're reflecting reality, right? And I think in this case, the recent conversation people are having about the Clintons being deposed, is that the right word? And so I was really captured by, I was really captured by that particular reel that talks about how they brought up Anthony Weiner's laptop and how there was a file there of Hillary Clinton and what that all meant and how the people connected to that case were found death by suicide. How many people were found death by suicide? Too many, too many. And so it says a lot. It says everything. It's glaring. Anyways, back to this. So after Simonson, the priest, is found murdered, right? Simonson's former murdered in the confessional by the former bodyguard. Okay, another really interesting. I keep hearing bodyguard and seeing also like people keep talking about handlers for the elites, and that's another conversation, but I think that there's also something there. And so under the direction of the governor, Thorne's superiors order him to end the investigation, which also tells you everything. Why would you want to end it after you realize the one person who knew possibly why has been killed? Anyway, Thorne tries to control. Thorne decides to continue, right? And he soon becomes aware that stalkers following him. Also very interesting to talk about stalkers in an age where we are seeing more surveillance of people who are, just literally just talking about what's going on and trying to inform people and trying to call out what's illegal, right? Anyways, he tries to control a violent mob during the shortage riot. So apparently the little wafers or the little bars, there's a shortage of them. So of course the masses revolt. He's attacked by the assassin who killed Simonson. Killer tries to shoot him, but misses, eventually striking innocent bystanders. Thorne manages to locate the killer, throw him to the ground, shoots him in the leg. The killer shoots him in the leg before being crushed by a shovel, which continually scoops up shovels of people. And anyways, the killer is killed in some freak whatever accident with this hydraulic shovel. In researching the case for Thorne, his roommate Roth brings over 2 volumes of Soylent oceanographic survey report taken by Thorne from Simonson's apartment. And so these books quickly conclude from the oceanographic reports that the oceans are dying and cannot produce the plankton from which Soylent Green is allegedly made. Hello. So here we are at a point where, as I was describing this to my friend, I was like, this sounds very familiar. We're seeing the same things happening thanks to, again, the billionaires, thanks to this like incessant, actually crazy desire to continuously destroy the planet, make things worse. You would think that you would want to use AI to just make the environment cleaner, that to bring something to the table. And I think that's where I get a little bit angry sometimes when it comes to all of this, because I'm like, how do we continue to go down a path of complete destruction and the possibility of extinction of all human and animal life? And so when I see these things, I think to myself, we have the ability to make things better, but we rely on what? The billionaire narrative, right? That they're here to make things better. Clearly not. So when I think about the fact that the oceans are dying and they can't produce plankton, they can't produce food, what do they turn to, right? And Bill Gates, of course, allegedly has been cited as saying that there's too many people, overpopulation, this almost what's the word? This fascination, right? And this like focus on overpopulation. And so anyway, this film that shows what happens, right, when now the oceans are dying, the world is dying, and this corporation, which makes the only right food for the people, for the masses, they reveal that rather than try to tell the people that there's a problem with the food, there's the food supply is going down, they start taking human bodies. And I remember at the time that when that hit in the classroom when I was watching it in high school, I think a lot of people were like, holy crap, like it sounded so wild, right? But it's funny how a lot of these things, it almost feels like they're hiding these things in plain sight. And now this is a film from the 80s, right? It was set in the film, it's set in 2022. So it's almost like saying like, by that time, it's projected that we won't have enough food to feed everyone. And so what do? In this film, they start taking human bodies and putting them into the wafers or the food supply. And so this information by Roth, he realizes it confirms that the murder of this high official in the corporation must have been done by the board members because they didn't want anyone to find out. And so Simonson had been increasingly troubled by it, and it sounded like he may have wanted to disclose it to the public, which is what led to his death. So, shaken by the truth, Roth decides to return to the home of God and seek assisted suicide. So in the film, the co-worker decides, you know what, this is too crazy, this is too wild, I'm out. I'm out, that's it. And so he goes to a clinic. And I think it's interesting because in the film, I remember like the reason that they got human bodies is because they would go to these clinics to either assisted suicide or because they no longer wanted to continue or for whatever reason. And I think I have to watch the film again, but I feel like it was almost a sense of like people started getting sick or tired or didn't want to keep working and living misery. And so when Thorne, the detective, discovers that Roth has decided to kill himself, he rushes to stop him, but he's too late. And before dying, Roth whispers the truth to Thorne, the detective, who's horrified. Thorne moves to uncover proof of these crimes against humanity and to bring it to the attention of the Supreme Exchange, basically whatever governing body, so that it could be brought to the Council of Nations to take action. And so Thorne secretly boards a waste truck that's transporting these human bodies to the corporation, to the Euthanasia Center, at the waste disposal plant, where he witnesses human corpses being processed and turned into Soylent Green. Again, the title of the film, the whole reason that am bringing this up, Thorne is discovered but escapes. As he returns to the Supreme Exchange, he is ambushed by Fielding and his men, and finding refuge in the same church that Simonson confessed, Thorne kills his attackers but is seriously wounded in a gunfight. As the paramedics are tending to Thorne, he urges his commander to spread the truth. Thorne starts shouting into the crowd, Soylent Green is people. Soylent Green is people. When you watch the film, that is and also I think in the trailer, Charlton Heston plays Robert Thorne. I don't know if anybody even remembers. I remember him from a long time ago, but American actor, huge at the time. But when this film came out, again, let me see if they have like what the reception is. But yeah, it was just really an incredible film. Critical response, mixed reactions. I think definitely at the time people didn't have couldn't connect with it, but I think quite like now as it's aged, like people are really seeing it's not just a dystopian thriller, it's saying a lot about the world today. And so again, all of these different films, between this one, Welcome to Derry, The Bride, they just really, I felt, as I was watching The Bride today, like they all really capture so well what society is now grappling with, all these allegations of whether our food is really food, whether just thinking about all the allegations, our top leaders being connected to child trafficking. And, I think that, as we continue to see how this all plays out, it's so important to also think about how Hollywood really does try to tell us what's going on, right? And I think, people were sort of in shock, but there were others that have been seeing these patterns for a long time that I've been talking to. They're like, you're a little late to the game, but it's true. These are the kinds of things that make you wonder exactly how are the people at the top abusing their power or, taking advantage to exploit people, exploit children, exploit women. Again, highly recommend watching The Bride. It was truly, I'm still processing it. I'll watch it again and possibly, do some scenes and analyze some scenes that they did here. But this Rotten Tomatoes 60% is really dumb. It should be at like 90%. It was incredible. Maybe there were certain things that I say could have been, but honestly, I don't know. It felt like such a perfect film for especially this time, and with everything that we're dealing with. I think that's also been a little bit of what I've been like trying to grapple with, why as a society we're not doing more against what these literal monsters are doing. I think the fact that she also like has the protagonist and Frankenstein, right? Like they're monsters, like they're not living, and yet they're almost calling out the inhumanity, right, within our society, the ways that, I look at everything that's happening in the Epstein Files, and I'm like, these people don't even seem human with the way that they treat others. They're just so confident in being able to torture, harm, kill, do other things. And so when I think about Hollywood and I think about how there are a lot of like things within it that are used to dumb us down or used to hide the facts, or it's important for us to pay attention. So in any case, I hope you'll watch these films and think about that and think about how that relates. But I think I really like The Bride because it felt like a way to really touch on the way women especially are exploited. And again, we've seen what's in the Epstein Files, and to this day, there hasn't been an arrest, right? If anything, outside of the US, more than in the US, there has been more action that has been brought against these perpetrators. So again, watch the films. Let me know what you think. Put in the comments if you've already seen The Bride or Soylent Green. If you've seen Soylent Green and you're like, yes, I saw that too, put it in the comments. And if you want to support the podcast, just subscribe. I have a merch store. By the way, someone brought up, I have forgotten to tell more people about this, but like this hat, people were like, I love this hat. I love the Borican and how we really don't see, like, this is one of the reasons I made it. I'm like, we really don't see the original name of Puerto Rico often enough. So yeah, go check out my merch store. It's boricanpod.shop. And then, yeah, just continue to follow me on Substack. I love doing these shorter analyses on Substack where I get to tell people a little bit about just what's going on in Puerto Rico. So thank you guys again, and I look forward to the next analysis of possibly many more films. We'll see. But have a good night, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.